begin to fuse together at the onset of puberty, around the age of 13 or 14. And by the time the Negro reaches the age of 19, those cranial sutures have fused shut, thereby preventing the Negro from learning anything else after the age of 19. So if you haven't gotten all there is to get by the age of 19, you're out of luck. This lie was used to justify our enslavement. And we have to understand that it is a lie. More importantly, we have to begin to use every means at our disposal to uncover the lies and to enlighten ourselves to assume our rightful place in history. So when we study the Nile Valley is significant because it represents the oldest evidence of the development of culture. By culture, I mean writing, science, philosophy, architecture, mathematics, medicine, engineering, you name it, it was developed in the Nile Valley before there was a Europe. And so what had to happen was to remove the Nile Valley from Africa, remove Egypt from Africa. And so in the 1940s, they came up with this notion that Egypt is in the Middle East. So whenever somebody tells you this lie, you've got to stop and ask the question, if Egypt is in the Middle East, then where's the Middle West? Where's the Middle North? Where's the Middle South? We've got to begin to understand, sisters and brothers, that we are in a war. We are existing in a state of war. It is unlike many wars that we're used to. They're not bombs bursting in the air, and we don't see the rocket's red glare. The war, the battlefield is right here in our minds. And whoever controls what you think, particularly your perceptions of the past, will be able to determine your quality of life today, and more importantly, the quality of life for the next 3 generations. Why 3 generations? You see, because what you know, you're going to pass on to your children. And your children will pass on to their children. And their children will pass on to their children. So if you have not taken a stand to challenge the lies, and you will continue to perpetuate this miseducation process, which is going to affect the quality of life of your great-grandchildren. This is a serious dilemma that we're confronted with, sisters and brothers. But we're at a crossroads, a very important crossroads in history, where we have the ability now to change things almost instantaneously. Through lectures such as this, through books, through audio tapes and videotapes, there's more information available today about African people than at any point in time within the last 500 years. You can change the world tomorrow. But you must begin here. You must begin here. So let me begin by going into the slides. Let me just jump right into it. And hopefully, as I hope is the tradition, we'll have some time at the end of the presentations for some questions and answers. In terms of just sharing with you the images, I'd like to, brother, can you kill that light? I'd like to begin with this image because it's important. This is an ad that you'll generally find in many publications during the month of February, so-called Black History Month. It was an ad that was published by the now defunct corporation, Eastern Airlines, that states a historical truth. And that truth is, before there was American history, there was Black history. And they accurately portray that Black history as ancient Nile Valley history. The only problem is, the only time you'll find ads such as this is during February. The only place you will find ads such as this is in so-called Black publications. Jet, Essence, Ebony. You'll never see an ad such as this in Time, in Life, in Newsweek. It is as if we are the only ones who are supposed to know this story. And the only time we're supposed to know it is February, which is the shortest month of the year, and the coldest month of the year, which has been set aside to celebrate the history of the oldest people on the planet. It is insane. So we have to begin to understand that every day is an opportunity for us to celebrate our history and our culture. We must see and understand the reality that history is a weapon that can be used in your mental liberation. Next slide, please. Again, when we talk about the Nile Valley, we talk about the development of architecture. The very first building ever designed and constructed by human beings is still standing today. in Africa, the Step Pyramid of Saqqara, designed by a person that I'm sure all of you all know, Imhotep, the brother responsible for designing this structure. Again, when you see this image, you must allow this image to wash away all of the derogatory stereotypes that we have in our mind, that we have ingrained in our minds about Africa, believing that Africans lived in caves, lived in trees, lived in huts. They designed the first skyscrapers on the planet. This is a remarkable accomplishment. Do you understand the thinking that went into designing this structure? The engineering that went into cutting the stones and placing the stones together. Can you imagine the coordinated effort it took to transport the stones, to manage the crews necessary for constructing this? We're talking about an architectural marvel, sisters and brothers, that we don't see anywhere else in the world. Next slide. It's also important, can you give me some focus on that too? It's also important to identify certain faces with specific points of time in history, particularly now that folk want to claim that Egypt was this multicultural environment. It was after it had been conquered by the foreigners, and that was very late in the history of ancient Kemet. Thousands of years after. Thank you. We can't have it all, but we do the best we can. It's important for you to see this face and to know that this is Zoser, a king of Kemet, a man who during his reign was one of the most powerful men on earth, commanded the mightiest army on the face of this planet, was one of the wealthiest men on the earth. We can still tell that he is a brother, even though his nose is missing. And that's no accident. We'll talk a little bit about missing noses and lips later on in this presentation. Can we have the next slide, brother? Here we see three structures which represent the most important archaeological site on the planet. It is at Giza where you can find this selection of pyramids, the most significant of which is in the background here. This is Khufu's pyramid, a structure which, from the time that it was built, approximately 2500 BCE, up until 109 years ago, this building was the tallest man-made structure on Earth. It covers an area of 13 acres. 3.5 blocks wide by 3.5 blocks wide by 3.5 blocks wide by 3.5 blocks wide. Rises to a height of 450 feet, as tall as a 45-story building. This one building is comprised of over 2.5 million stone blocks, which weigh an average of 2.5 tons each. There are 5 stones inside of this building that weigh 70 tons, as much as a railroad locomotive. And the technology does not exist today to move a stone that weighs 70 tons. I want you to understand something about the technological greatness that existed thousands of years ago that cannot be duplicated today. There's enough stone in this great pyramid of Khufu to make 30 Empire State Buildings. Do you understand what you are seeing, sisters and brothers? And you must also understand that this building was not built by slave labor, nor was it built by so-called Jews when they were enslaved in Africa. Because as Doc Van has said on numerous occasions, this structure was built over 1,000 years before the first Jew, Abraham, was born. This is a reality. So again, you have to understand why the Europeans are unwilling to give up Kemet. Because this is a testimonial to the greatness of the minds of African men and women. It is a testimonial to what you can do when you get that little white man out the back of your mind, when you resurrect your African consciousness and recreate your greatness. Next slide, please. Now, you all know what this statue is, don't you? What is it? All right. Now, I hear several different names, and let's deal with that issue right now, because it's important for us to realize that most of the names of African